Hello, my name is Jason Doty, and today I will be discussing my concern for the state of Connecticut and the current way, or in our current telecom providers, and my fears for the future about landline service, especially, but also um, just having reliable telecommunication networks in the state of Connecticut with new and emerging technology like fixed wireless over 5G, um, and also with newer providers, pre-existing providers, and older providers like Frontier. I believe it's an important discussion and something that not only the state should be looking at, but also residents of the state should be looking at. Um, if we don't pay attention to what is going on in the state of Connecticut with telecommunication companies, we are going to have less reliable networks in the state of Connecticut, and we're also going to have a lot of competition issues in the state of Connecticut. So, firstly, I just want to briefly discuss some of the telecommunication providers in the state of Connecticut, who they are, and what they provide in the state of Connecticut, and also how recent developments in telecommunication news has made things a little bit more dicey when it comes to the future of reliable telecommunications. So, firstly, I'm going to start off with cellular providers in the state of Connecticut. As you know, almost everyone in the state of Connecticut now has a cellular line, either through the major companies or through multiple virtual network operators like Cricket, Visible by Verizon, Total by Verizon, Metro by T-Mobile, Tello, private MVNO. You also have like US Mobile. So in that regard, you have a lot of competition, but the only issue is where are most people during their lives or during the day? Most people are at home. Most people are using home internet. They're also using that home internet for things like Wi-Fi calling or voice over IP calling, especially in areas with bad service or reception. You also have a lot of people in the States still, especially more elderly people, using landline services. Most of these services now being voice over IP, especially if they're using like Frontier Fiber, if they're using DOCSIS cable networks that like Cox, Charter Spectrum, and Comcast Xfinity have. And I believe that as time is going on, in many ways we are improving, especially as a state and as a country with telecommunications, but at the same time, these new technologies bring issues along with them, or like some baggage. And I believe this is an important discussion for today in 2025, where more than ever we are relying on cellular networks, but we also have many people relying on their home networks for voice and for internet communications for their personal lives, private businesses, and for things like that. So to start off with, sorry for all the rambling, I'm going to list the 4 major network operators in the state of Connecticut. So we currently have Verizon Wireless, AT&T Wireless, T-Mobile, and Boost Wireless, with the big 3 being Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T, of course, and Boost being a smaller carrier that's been building out a network for about 4 years now in the state of Connecticut and many other parts of the country. At this point in time, they have up to about 70% of the population in the United States covered with their service, but as recent news has developed, they are planning to sell most of their spectrum, or all of their spectrum, to AT&T and SpaceX, and in that regard, we have lost competition, and we are losing a good network that a handful of people have been able to use in the state of Connecticut, including myself, for over 2 years. So in that case, I do believe it is a loss to us as citizens, but that's not the point of this video here today. So I'm just going to mention all the providers again. So fiber again, we have Frontier Communications of Connecticut, and we also have GoNet Speed. In some more regional areas, we may have other fiber providers that I'm not listing, but we may have like some fiber in the state by Comcast, Xfinity, Charter Spectrum, or Cox. I personally haven't seen it, but it is possible. We also have just like the pure play cable providers. For the most part, you have Comcast, Xfinity, Cox, Charter Spectrum, and then you also have traditional copper plain on telephone service with Frontier Communications of Connecticut again, and this is the incumbent local exchange carrier of Connecticut, and they're actually legally Southern New England Telephone. This company is a company that was founded in the late 1880s and has served the state of Connecticut for over 100 years, with all other infrastructure in all different states of repair/disrepair. But many people still rely on these older assets with plain old telephone service. Many big organizations, private homes, and even businesses still rely on these services and provide in this major provider in the state. And I believe with more recent developments, we are going to have lots of issues with reliability in the state of Connecticut and even more abroad in this country. So to start, this map that I'm on is the Connecticut Broadband Mapping Hub. This is a map that is maintained by the GIS office and the Office of Policy and Management. I do not know if they work with Pura, but this is a pretty good looking map in my opinion when I've been going through it for more local areas to me, like Vernon, and also going up into more rural areas like Norfolk and Berks Hempstead. So to start off with, to get this one point out of the way right away, I have seen in parts of Connecticut where we do not have really any competition, especially in apartment complexes, older neighborhoods, or neighborhoods that have underground lines. We don't have as much competition as we should. Yes, we now have fixed wireless, but I'll tell you why I have many issues with it myself in a bit. So for example, my grandmother lives in Pheasant Run. There are 3 neighborhoods in this community. There's Pheasant Run 2, and Pheasant Run 3, and this community is made up of 55 plus community members in my local town, Vernon Rockville. So just so I can get my point across, I'm now going to go to Pheasant Run, Vernon, CT, because this is a road in this area. So here's this area. It's near like Talcottville Road, Dart Hill. There's a park nearby. The high school is relatively nearby. So our older community members in this area, most of them do have good internet service, way above broadband service. I believe broadband now is 100 megabits per second by 20 or 25 megabits per second up. And in this block that I chose, this block serving my grandmother, there are 193 serviceable locations. We have AT&T with their fixed wireless, Comcast with their coax network. It's a hybrid fiber coax network using the DOCSIS protocol. You also have Frontier with their POTS service, DSL, and fiber. You have GoNet Speed with their fiber service, but this is more in areas that have above ground wiring. And then you have Verizon fixed wireless. I believe there's also T-Mobile fixed wireless. I'm not sure why I don't see it here, but I do believe they have service in this region. But it's possible that they don't, because when I've checked, the only one that you can still get service on, at least in her neighborhood, is AT&T for fixed wireless. Her specific neighborhood in this block only has fixed wireless providers, Comcast cable, and then Frontier with the older copper hot service with DSL if you were a older customer back in the days of like AT&T with like Uverse and everything. So 5 providers again. We have 16 locations that are gigabit capable, and there's 193 served. So that's the thing that I get a little confused by is you got this, but then you go down here, it's saying meeting the state goal. So they do have some issues. But if I go down here, yeah, see, this is what is weird. Like they're saying, oh, it's been 100% met, but then they mention that it's not. So that's the thing that bothers me a little bit. But anyways, if you do have fiber in this area, the highest you can get is Frontier Fiber, 7 gigabit per second upload and download. You also have like a mean download of just under 1.4 gigabits per second. So yeah, and then upload. Yeah, so this is an issue. Minimum upload. You will not get upload like this on cable networks unless they're DOCSIS 4. You won't get this on DSL or DSL networks either, or fixed wireless. So there are issues with this. But let's go down here. So again, here are all the providers. There's the gigabit providers. The only 2 listed are Frontier and GoNet Speed. Comcast also provides gigabit coax service. So again, I don't get why. I'm assuming this might be gigabit up and down because I do see up here these 3 have 1 gigabit per second / 100 megabit per second upload. So I'm thinking that's why there's the 2 categories. But my issue with this is maybe that's why the 2 things are there with like the percentage of people with gigabit capable addresses and then the actual percentage. I'm assuming maybe they are talking about like the gigabit providers exclusively, like 1000 megabit per second up and 1000 megabit per second down. But anyways, so there's DSL in this neighborhood. Like I was mentioning, my grandmother's neighborhood only has DSL, plain old telephone service, and coax. So it makes sense that there's 19 people. My grandmother is one of these residents that still has copper. There's 193 served by cable, so mostly everyone in this whole area has cable. Cable has been here for multiple decades now. They've been improving their networks year after year, especially with newer DOCSIS upgrades and more backhaul upgrades. So even though they are overpriced, especially Xfinity, I am very grateful that they have served our community so well, and they have local teams that are working to improve and maintain this network. That isn't the same with Frontier and their DSL. They were not maintaining that well. Their fiber they're doing a lot better with, but even still, look, there's only 16 locations served by fiber. So like these neighborhoods do not have fiber access because it's underground. It's older communities. Most of them probably have TV still. It's not financially feasible, but Frontier refuses to let new customers have DSL. And in my opinion, not only is that removing competition from the incumbent cable provider, but it's also making it so the only other way to get high-speed internet is to have either HughesNet, and most of these places don't allow people to have these dishes on the roofs, and that has high latency, or you'll be using fixed wireless. But like see, you can get fixed wireless here. But my issue with this is besides for like plain old telephone service, none of these have backup power on the side of the local residents. If they don't have a generator or some means of powering their cable modem, their DSL modem, or even like their fixed wireless gateway, they're not gonna have internet service with no power unless there's batteries in them. And most of the time, they do not provide batteries with this equipment. It's something that people have to buy. It's also it's also just not standard in most equipment. Um, so that's my issue is with reliability. You're having people now where if the power goes out, if they have a landline, they won't have any service with the cable if there's no power. You have people with the fixed wireless where if their power goes out and their access point slash gateway doesn't have battery backup, they're not going to have they're not going to have home service. They may have cell phone service still, but cell phone service, at least in my understanding, that's more federally controlled than state controlled. So the state can't force companies to have backup power. So most cell sites do, especially more rural areas, and I would say many urban areas if it's an old cell tower. But if you're being served by like a tower on a building, like I've seen in many parts of Vernon, most likely there may not be battery backup on all the carriers. I'm assuming at least one carrier does have battery backup or generator backup with their equipment on most cell sites, at least one, but it's not something that's mandated. So even if you did have power on your end, if it's more than 8 hours, 24 hours, and there's no tech or person that comes out from one of these major companies or one of the contractors, guess what? You don't have any cell service or home internet. So that's why I believe it's important that people understand this. It's also important that with the landline networks that we have, coax and DSL and fiber, that the customer equipment, the DSL modems have batteries, the cable modems have batteries, and the ONTs and routers have batteries for Frontier. I believe it's very important, especially for this portion of our community that is older, that most likely has landline service, and if they don't, they're still using a lot of the times Wi-Fi calling for their calls at their houses, especially if cell service isn't the greatest of their houses. I've seen cell service with it advertised with 5G ultra wideband, 5G plus, 5G ultra capacity, but in a lot of these buildings you don't get that, or they say it's there but you're really not getting it because you're on cell edge, because especially in Vernon most of the towers are more near the edges of the town. So like this middle section of town, like going down Center Road, like the Walgreens and stuff, doesn't always have consistent or good speeds. I know there's a tower near the GMC dealership, but even then, I've seen it where my Motorola's hopped on and off of ultra wideband for service. It's gone down to LTE. I've seen spots in town where LTE is very unusable. It's not something that's as reliable as these landline services, and I believe that we need to make these landline services more reliable for people, but we also need to tell people and communicate that, hey, cellular is going to be there 99% of the time, but when it does go down, even if you have power and stuff on your end or battery backups, guess what? You're going to lose everything now if you have fixed wireless. You won't be able to do Wi-Fi calling. You won't be able to do normal cell phone cellular calls. You won't be able to connect to the internet. It's just not a good thing for us, especially because most people aren't doing dual SIMs and being on multiple networks at once, like I am. So I do believe it's important that we make it so people know that these cellular networks aren't as reliable and aren't as mandated to have backup power, but also that the pre-existing landline services or all local premises equipment or user equipment has backup power. Personally, I use a UPS that I bought from Walmart for $89, and that's how I keep my networking gear operational for about 1 to 2 hours before I need to turn on a generator or something like that. So for like fire alarm systems, other systems in the house, there's still power. Because not everyone has like an ADT system now where it's wireless and it has battery backup. And even if you do have battery backup, if the tower goes down, you're not going to be able to have a call or something go through to like a company like ADT. If my cell tower near me goes down in like a emergency or disaster, it's going to take a while for it to be functional again, and your things that you're relying on, like ADT or security services, won't work. While when they're on landline services, they would work, especially with like plain old telephone service, stuff like that. I'm actually currently in the process of upgrading our ADT equipment to have cellular because it didn't really work correctly unless you're on the Comcast internet or on normal plain old telephone service. I did finally get to work on Frontier Fiber, but we wanted to save money because we were spending over $40 for the landline and $70 for our security services. But we do still have Comcast for internet now, so we have Comcast Now Internet 100 by 25, and we also have multiple cell phone or cellular companies serving the house. Like we have multiple providers. So if the tower goes down, we still have Comcast cable for Wi-Fi calling. And the battery backup for that, we still have we now have a landline through Consumer Cellular, and this equipment does have a battery backup, and it's just pretty much a glorified cell phone if you really think about it. But that's still better than what most of these companies provide, especially Comcast, Frontier, Cox, Charter, Spectrum. They don't normally have equipment that provides a battery built in, and the battery in this equipment is a lithium-ion battery. So I just want to say that. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that we need to make things more reliable. We need to serve people. We need to have competition. Like they should be providing DSL internet still to any new customers if they do not have fiber here. It's unacceptable that there's only one internet provider that's landline. There's two that have phones that are landline, but only one really has a traditional phone service, and the other one is voice over IP that requires you to have power at your house with your equipment to actually work. And also the same with fixed wireless. Like I was saying, it's just not as regulated when it comes to emergency power backup, in my humble opinion, especially because it's just, from my understanding, they can't force it. So now I'm going to get more out of the suburban area. I'm going to now go to, let's see, it was Bard. I went way up. I went out of Connecticut. We don't want to do that. So I'm going to go to Norfolk, right? So most of this area has at least cable. So for example, if I click here in Norfolk, this is going to be another block. If it actually work. Okay, sorry about that. So this is a smaller block, but 26 addresses with broadband internet. There's 21 that have gigabit capable speeds. I'm assuming this is going to be on cable. Let's see. Oh, no, they do have some fiber. But if we go down here, they have Comcast Xfinity, and they have Frontier and Comcast. And it looks like there is fixed wireless with AT&T and Verizon. So now that I go down here, let's see. So you got one house with DSL. You have 26 served by cable, and you have 21 that can be served by fiber. So, or are served by fiber. So yeah, this is going to be using voice over IP. This is going to be using voice over IP for either the landline service or if you're using like Wi-Fi calling. You're also going to have, you still have DSL in this area. It looks like it's still active, or most likely DSL is inactive because if you're a new customer you can't get it, but most likely you can still get plain old telephone service because carrier of last resort. But this is just, in my opinion, not really acceptable. We're pushing people to standards that aren't reliable when power goes out, but we're also having people go on fixed wireless that can even be less reliable than these providers. Because Comcast, at least, they're going to have people at poles at different nodes powering things. You're going to have power going to the amps for their cable network. You're going to have people out there on the streets fixing stuff. With these major telephone companies, if a major tower issue occurs, it could take months to get repaired. You also well, you also just don't tend to have as many staff for these major companies servicing these cell towers as often, or being ready to go out there and get backup power working. Like, yes, I've seen it before. I've seen it in Ellington with like T-Mobile doing like servicing a cell phone tower that was on a wire tower, but that's not always the case, especially more or more rural areas, especially if trees fall or other things fall and they can't get to the tower, you're SOL. So yeah, that's the one I really want to talk about there. And then like a good example of a place that I feel like is very underserved is Barks Homestead. Yep, right here. So look, you do have you have good service in this area. You have good service in Granby in this area for the most part. Like, it looks like that most people have capable services. But now let's click here in Barks Homestead. 73 serviceable addresses. There's 5 providers. So there's 2 fixed wireless. There's 2 cable companies, and there's 1 fiber/POTS provider with Frontier. But look, served location 73. There's only 31 that are gigabit capable, and that's okay. Most people don't need gigabit speeds. I'm nowhere near gigabit speeds, and as you can see, everything's working fine. But yeah, there's 100% served locations, 42% gigabit capable. That's okay. But yeah, so you have fiber in some of this area. But look at this. If we go down here now, you have 20 people still on copper and DSL. So they're either older customers that have DSL internet, or the customers that really probably only have the Frontier for the landline. It's possible they have landline and then like Comcast or another one of the companies, or even like all the fixed wireless providers. You have 72 with cable. You'll see this in a lot of rural areas. Cable has actually maintained their networks, been competitive, not been competitive price-wise, but been competitive speed-wise, even with fiber now. And they have local teams and contractors serving these networks like Buckley's. You have 31 serviced by fiber. Again, local teams do tend to maintain this network, and I'm grateful for that. You have 55 that are served by fixed wireless. In my opinion, fixed wireless is not super reliable, and there are many things we need to do as a state to make it more reliable on the customer side of things, but also on the cellular site side of things. So 27 served by copper, 98 is served by cable, 42 can be served by fiber. So, I think this is talking about who's currently served. But yeah, it's great that we have these fixed wireless providers, and we have all this competition when it comes to the number of providers, but they're just not, like, in my opinion, reliable or up to the reliability that we should have in 2025. Like, plain old telephone service is very reliable. As long as the physical line is still having electricity going through it, you can most likely still do a call. Because I've seen it, not as much in Connecticut, but up in like rural parts of like Pennsylvania, like Elk County, they have Windstream. They have copper lines that are covered by trees that are touching the ground. They have lines all over the place that are in all different states of disrepair. Still works. DSL still works in these rural areas, so there's no excuse why we can't provide DSL and also POT service in these areas, even if fiber and other new standards occur. I understand it's expensive to maintain these networks, they're energy hungry, but we shouldn't be turning this off until we have something that is just as reliable or more reliable than plain old telephone service. So yeah, and just to give you an example of like the cell coverage that these carriers claim to have, we have AT&T. So AT&T probably only has fixed wireless in these 5G plus areas. This is their ultra wideband N77, 3700 megahertz or 3500 megahertz Department of Defense spectrum. If you're in areas that just have normal 5G, most customers on AT&T will be using LTE predominantly, with a little bit of 5G in these areas, with 5G NSA non-standalone, still using the LTE infrastructure and core infrastructure for data sessions, calling, text. So I want people to know that this is pretty much LTE, unless you're in areas that have like 5G plus. It's most predominantly LTE. Even in these areas, you're most likely still using LTE as the base of your connection with non-standalone. They're only just starting to have standalone service in the United States. Same with Verizon. Verizon actually claims that they have ultra wideband in all these areas, and I'm gonna pray that they do. But as you can see, like once you get out of those areas, you have I'm so sorry, guys. Is it really? Anyways, you're gonna have LTE or satellite, and my issue with this is yes, LTE is reliable. I'm grateful we have it, but it should not be a person's main connection. There should still be landline services, reliable Wi-Fi networks, and just land-based networks serving people. We don't want people relying on satellite SMS when the cellular network goes down. I want people to be able to do Wi-Fi calling or to have landline phones that work and are just as reliable as plain old telephone service. But I'm happy with Verizon's Day of Connect. They have been upgrading a lot. Even my local tower, they've upgraded. The other two haven't really touched it. They actually canceled their permits for my tower. I should check again to see if they're going to redo it. But now I'm going to go and let's look at T-Mobile. So main part of the community has ultra capacity. You would hope so. They merged with Sprint. That's a whole different rabbit hole I don't want to go down. But that's good that they have this, especially after 5 years of having Sprint's N41 spectrum. As you can see, they have extended range too, so that's just their 600 megahertz like N71 spectrum. It's pretty much just LTE. If you're in these areas, you're going to get very similar speeds to LTE. LTE could have you anywhere from 2 megabits per second to 100 to 200 megabits per second, or even higher in some cases in like areas if you're right near a tower. You still have 3G in some areas because not 3G. You still have 2G in some areas because they have that on in most parts of the country still, especially if it's more rural areas. A lot of older equipment at companies and places still have 2G service, and now they have satellite as well. You would think that all these companies spending so much on their terrestrial networks and their spectrum that they would actually put more into this than put a lot of their spectrum into satellite, but sadly, these companies don't care to build out as much as they should. And in my opinion, when they get money for building in rural areas, they don't do it that well. So it's very unfortunate we're having to go into satellite-based technologies. It's great in areas where there's absolutely no service, or it's like a national state forest or a federal national park. It's great that people can get service there because a lot of times they don't let them build towers. But other than that, in my opinion, it's not great that we're pushing into satellite. Partner, luckily, there's not much roaming in Connecticut for T-Mobile. If you are roaming in Connecticut as a T-Mobile customer, you're most likely an AT&T. So yeah, it's just in my humble opinion, cellular isn't as reliable as it should be, especially if we're going to be using it now for home internet and people's solution for landline phones, especially because a lot of people now use Wi-Fi calling in areas with bad service. So if these people are also like in these areas where they have this 5G ultra capacity, 5G plus 5G ultra wideband, they can do calls and stuff just fine. But if these towers go down and they're not fixed, or their backup power goes down, you're screwed. Even if you have power at your address with like battery backup, a generator, stuff like that. So just in my humble opinion, it's not as reliable as it should be, especially in these more mountainous and rural parts of our state. Even out near me, like I was saying with Quail Hollow, even in Coventry and stuff, we want to have reliable service, especially if it's serving older individuals that may need help more often, or if it's people in these areas that rely on this for communication, or rely on these major networks, either landline or cellular, for their major communication, or even sometimes the one provider they have for major communication. Especially with Frontier getting bought by Verizon, my biggest fear as a resident of the state is they're going to continue to do fiber in urban markets, but they're going to stop building it out in maybe rural markets, or they'll never build in these neighborhoods underground. And instead of having people on DSL or on the POTS lines, we're now going to be pushing people to fix wireless. And yeah, it's great when it works, but if we're not forcing these companies to have just as reliable networks as our landline providers, if they're going to be servicing homes, I don't think it's safe, and I don't think it's something that we should be allowing, even if the federal government oversees the reliability and other side of, or the cellular side of things way more than the state. I think we should be pushing for backup power, better backup power for these cellular companies, especially if they're providing home services in areas. All premises customer equipment should have battery backups. Doesn't matter the type. If they have internet service or if they have landline, even with DSL, they should have batteries for the modems and routers. Unless it's someone's like equipment that's been provided to them, like if it's their own personal equipment that they own, like the now internet that I have, then that's a different story. But if it's their internet that they can take, reclaim, replace at any time, should have battery backup. And that's just my humble opinion on the state of things. And the last thing I want to say for this section is a lot of organizations, bigger companies, Central Connecticut State University, most likely UConn, Eastern Connecticut State University, Southern Connecticut State University, I believe, and even like the community colleges, or the community college with the multiple campuses, most likely still uses POTS service for some of their lines, like elevators, fire alarms, other services like that, especially because stringent regulations when it comes to safety. And even like other smaller companies throughout the state, ECHN, Hartford Healthcare, they probably also have this in a lot of their organizations. Not only are a lot of these buildings and campuses old, but also there's a lot of elevators, there's a lot of old equipment like fax machines and stuff that still uses plain old telephone service. So I believe that we still need to maintain it. We still need to serve these customers, especially if a lot of these businesses aren't able to afford upgrading or having their own phone solution. Like my school, Central, we use Cisco, and we have Cisco phones. We can do a lot of the phone stuff in house, but we still have POTS lines in 2025. We still have stuff that is vital and needs battery backup. But the thing that scares me is I've seen like subscriber loop carrier cabinets like at my school, and they're from the 80s, and that's fine. I'm fine with old equipment, but if we don't have we have batteries in it from 2010, and maybe they are meant to last as long. Maybe they have been testing them, but I think it's very important that throughout the state we make sure that these are up to date, maintained by the ISPs, and that we make it so either the ISP or the provider or the local exchange carrier can actually manage the equipment, maintain it, and test it more often, but also that we keep these things active and working, and we have things, if they're getting switched to cellular, we're making sure they're just as reliable, and that the sites that are serving these locations actually have backup power. It's not acceptable to be a replacement if it's not as reliable. And that's just my humble opinion. Thank you for listening to this section, and now to get back to the normal PowerPoint. Thank you.